A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, Chapter 26, The First Newspaper. When I told the king I was going out disguised as a petty freeman to scour the country and familiarize myself with the humbler life of the people, he was all afire with the novelty of the thing in a minute, and was bound to take a chance in the adventure himself. Nothing should stop him. He would drop everything and go along. It was the prettiest idea he had run across for many a day. He wanted to glide out the back way and start at once, but I showed him that that wouldn't answer. You see, he was billed for the king's evil, to touch for it, I mean, and it wouldn't be right to disappoint the house, and it wouldn't make a delay worth considering anyway. It was only a one-night stand, and I thought he ought to tell the queen he was going away. He clouded up at that and looked sad. I was sorry I had spoken, especially when he said mournfully, "Thou forgettest that Lancelot is here, and where Lancelot is, she noteth not the going forth of the king, nor what day he returneth." Of course I changed the subject. Yes, Guinevere was beautiful, it is true, but take her all around, she was pretty slack. I never meddled in these matters. They weren't my affair, but I did hate to see the way things were going on, and I didn't mind saying that much. Many's the time she had asked me, "Sir Boss, hast seen Lancelot about?" But if ever she went fretting around for the king, I didn't happen to be around at the time. There was a very good layout for the king's evil business, very tidy and creditable. The king sat under a canopy of state. About him were clustered a large body of the clergy in full canonicals, conspicuous both for location and personal outfit. Stood Morinel, a hermit of the quack doctor species, to introduce the sick. All abroad over the spacious floor, and clear down to the doors in a thick jumble, lay or sat the scrofulous under a strong light. It was as good as a tableau. In fact, it had all the look of being gotten up for that, though it wasn't. There were 800 sick people present. The work was slow. It lacked the interest of novelty for me, because I had seen the ceremonies before. The thing soon became tedious, but the proprieties required me to stick it out. The doctor was there for the reason that in such crowds there were many people who only imagined something was the matter with them, and many who were consciously sound but wanted the immortal honor of fleshly contact with a king, and yet others who pretended to illness in order to get the piece of coin that went with the touch. Up to this time, this coin had been a wee little gold piece, worth about a third of $1. When you consider how much that amount of money would buy in that age and country, and how usual it was to be scrofulous when not dead, you would understand that the annual king's evil appropriation was just the river and harbor bill of that government for the grip it took on the treasury, and the chance it afforded for skinning the surplus. So I had privately concluded to touch the treasury itself for the king's evil. I covered 6/7 of the appropriation into the treasury a week before starting from Camelot on my adventures, and ordered that the other 7th be inflated into 5-cent nickels and delivered into the hands of the head clerk of the king's evil department. A nickel to take the place of each gold coin, you see, and do its work for it. It might strain the nickel some, but I judged it could stand it. As a rule, I do not approve of watering stock, but I considered it square enough in this case, for it was just a gift anyway. Of course, you can water a gift as much as you want to, and I generally do. The old gold and silver coins of the country were of ancient and unknown origin, as a rule, but some of them were Roman. They were ill-shapen and seldom rounder than a moon, that is, a week past full to the full. They were hammered, not minted, and they were so worn with use that the devices upon them were as illegible as blisters, and looked like them. I judged that a sharp, bright new nickel, with a first-rate likeness of the king on one side of it, and Guinevere on the other, and the blooming pious motto, would take the tuck off the scrofula as handy as a nobler coin, and please the scrofulous fancy more, and I was right. This batch was the first it was tried on, and it worked to a charm. The savings in expense was a notable economy. You will see that by these figures we touched a trifle over 708 of the 800 patients at former rates. This would have cost the government about $240. At the new rate, we pulled through for about $35, thus saving upward of $200 at one swoop. To appreciate the full magnitude of this stroke, consider these other figures. The annual expenses of a national government amount to the equivalent of a contribution of 3 days' average wages of every individual of the population, counting every individual as if he were a man. If you take a nation of 60 millions, where average wages are $2 per day, 3 days' wages taken from each individual will provide $360 million and pay the government's expenses. In my day, in my own country, this money was collected from imposts, and the citizen imagined that the foreign importer paid it. And it made him comfortable to think so, whereas in fact it was paid by the American people and was so equally and exactly distributed among them that the annual cost to the 100 millionaire and the annual cost to the suckling child of a day laborer was precisely the same. Each paid $6. Nothing could be equaler than that, I reckon. Well, Scotland and Ireland were tributary to Arthur, and the united populations of the British Islands amounted to something less than 1 million. A mechanic's average wage was 3 cents a day when he paid his own keep. By this rule, the national government's expenses were $90,000 a year, or about $250 a day. Thus, by the substitution of nickels for gold on a king's evil day, I not only injured no one, dissatisfied no one, but pleased all concerned, and saved 4/5 of that day's national expense into the bargain, a savings which would have been the equivalent of $800,000 in my day in America. In making this substitution, I had drawn upon the wisdom of a very remote source, the wisdom of my boyhood, for the true statesman does not despise any wisdom, howsoever lowly may be its origin. In my boyhood, I had always saved my pennies and contributed buttons to the foreign missionary cause. The buttons would answer the ignorant savage as well as the coin, and the coin would answer me better than the buttons. All hands were happy, and nobody hurt. Marnell took the patients as they came. He examined the candidate. If he couldn't qualify, he was warned off. If he could, he was passed along to the king. A priest pronounced the words, "They shall lay their hands on the sick, and they shall recover." Then the king stroked the ulcers while the reading continued. Finally, the patient graduated and got his nickel. The king, hanging it around his neck himself, and was dismissed. Would you think that that would cure? It certainly did. Any mummery will cure if the patient's faith is strong in it. Up by Asalot there was a chapel where the Virgin had once appeared to a girl who used to herd geese around there. The girl said to herself, and they built the chapel upon that spot and hung a picture in it representing the occurrence, a picture which you would think it dangerous for a sick person to approach, whereas on the contrary thousands of the lame and sick came and prayed before it every year and went away whole and sound, and even the well could look upon it and live. Of course, when I was told these things, I did not believe them, but when I went there and saw them, I had to succumb. I saw the cures effected myself, and they were real cures, and not questionable. I saw cripples, whom I had seen around Camelot for years on crutches, arrive and pray before that picture and put down their crutches and walk off without a limp. There were piles of crutches there, which had been left by such people as a testimony. In other places, people operated on a patient's mind without saying a word to him, and cured him in others. Experts assembled patients in a room and prayed over them, and appealed to their faith, and those patients went away cured. Wherever you find a king who can't cure the king's evil, you can be sure that the most valuable superstition that supports his throne, the subject's belief in the divine appointment of his sovereign, has passed away. In my youth, the monarchs of England had ceased to touch for the evil, but there was no occasion for this diffidence. They could have cured it 49 times in 50. Well, when the priest had been droning for 3 hours, and the good king polishing the evildoers, and the sick were still pressing forward as plenty as ever, I got to feeling intolerably bored. I was sitting by an open window not far from the canopy of state. For the 500th time a patient stood forward to have his repulsiveness stroked. Again those words were droned out, "Thou shalt lay their hands on the sick," and without there rang, clear as a clarion, a note that enchanted my soul and tumbled 13 worthless centuries about my ears. "Camelot Weekly, Hosanna and Literary Volcano. Latest eruption, only 2 cents, all about the big miracle in the Valley of Holiness. One greater than the king." One greater than the kings had arrived, the newsboy, but I was the only person in all that throng who knew the meaning of this mighty birth, and what this imperial magician was come into the world to do. I dropped a nickel out of the window and got my paper. Adam Newsboy of the World went around the corner to get my change. Is around the corner yet. It was delicious to see a newspaper again, yet I was conscious of a secret shock when my eyes fell upon the first batch of display headlines. I had lived in a clammy atmosphere of reverence, respect, deference so long that they sent a quivery little cold wave through me. "High times in the Valley of Holiness. The waterworks corked. Brer Merlin works his arts, but gets left. But the boss scores on his first innings. The miraculous well uncorked. Amid awful outbursts of infernal fire and smoke and thunder, the buzzard roast astonished. Unparalleled rejobbings." And so on and so on. Yes, it was too loud. Once I could have enjoyed it and seen nothing out of the way about it. But now its note was discordant. It was good Arkansas journalism, but this was not Arkansas. Moreover, the next to last line was calculated to give offense to the hermits, and perhaps lose us their advertising. Indeed, there was too lightsome a tone of flippancy all through the paper. It was plain I had undergone a considerable change without noticing it. I found myself unpleasantly affected by pert little irreverencies, which would have seemed but proper and airy graces of speech at an earlier period of my life. There was an abundance of the following breed of items, and they discomfited me. Local smoke and cinders. Sir Lancelot met up with old King Agrivance of Ireland unexpectedly last woke over on the moor south of Sir Balmoral Lemeros's hogdasture. The widow has been notified. Expenditure number 3 will start about the 1st of next Megson. A search F8R Sir Sagramore laid